The educator that I chose, which is Elliot Washor, who was the co-founder of the organisation called Big Picture Learning, with their philosophy, one student at a time. Picture learning was developed during the 1990s, where there was a big shift in the education system, with the sole focus being mainly around privileged and white children, then shifting to equal education across all races. And back in 1996 there was an Education Act passed which ensured that children of compulsory school age, which was 5 to 16, got the education that was suited to their age and their skill level. During this time as well, there was a lot of peace talks and conflict and bombing going on around the world, so there was a really big impact on the less fortunate children, and the violence that were going on in the world at the time were of very significant impact on not only the education that was occurring then, but for future children and future education, as these were impacts that were going to follow these children up into their primary school and high school years of learning. After 1996, educating our future became a really large focus of the education system, and it really shifted this focus of just educating the students to the students actually being individuals and focusing on the more human element of the students' learning. This had a big shift of the 1990s to the end of the 1990s, from compulsory education only being implemented to students that could afford it, to being an implementation for all students and it being more of a right born to deserve. It became something that all students should have the rights to, regardless of their background or ethnicity or their race or anything like that. So this time really had a very negative stigma around it due to a lot of the conflict and war happening, whereas this big picture learning really created a positive side, and it built off this negative conflict to really support the education of future years and future generations, and for it being an equal thing rather than just for certain individuals as well. As well, the curriculum was altered slightly to ensure that teachers were teaching to the correct standards and to the standards that were of a higher level, rather than just what they thought they should be teaching as well, to ensure that the right things were being taught to the right age groups. Motto, one student at a time, was really a significant change from it just being more the teachers being the top and then the students having to listen, and it kind of shifted that slightly to the students being the focus, and it catered to their strengths and their weaknesses and what more of their interests were, and that aided in the learning rather than them being forced to do something that they maybe couldn't really connect with and they didn't really have any real world or real life scenarios to do with what was being taught in the classroom. The big picture learning really pursued the students' personalised interests as well, and it really allowed them to engage fully in what they were being taught at school, and it built a really supportive community of learners where they wanted to come to school and their parents enjoyed sending them to school, and it was really more of a positive community that was being built around this big picture learning organisation and scheme that was being implemented in schools all across Australia as well from the 1990s, and it's still being implemented in schools now as well. It just, in a nutshell, established an individualised learning approach. So it really rethought the educational system, and it allowed the teachers to kind of move away from the more curriculum and written standards that were being met, and it sort of shifted towards real life expectations and real life scenarios, and it allowed the students to really engage fully in their own learning as well. This organisation has a commitment to equality of all learning, so it really catered to all students' abilities, capabilities and skill set as well. The design of big picture learning really pushed the boundaries of education, what we've seen in the past and what we're moving to in the future. It really was in that line dividing what was and what is going to be, and what didn't work and what has been working, and building upon those more positive learning elements from the past to implement it into the future as well. And this organisation really built these students that maybe have been marginalised. It really built them up, and it had a supportive community around them to ensure that they weren't being left out, weren't being left alone, and they had a lot of kids that they could work with to really support their education. The organisation also really prepares high school students for real world experiences and scenarios that they might have to face once leaving school, maybe things that they haven't been taught at home that maybe they should have been taught, or things that they maybe just haven't learnt yet properly or haven't grasped properly. It's allowed them to be it's a vigorous study of their entrepreneurship, so it's really encouraged their own ideas and ways of thinking and what they deem to be important. It really encourages this creativity that students thrive off of, and it allows them to thrive in their own learning environment, as well as building this really supportive community around their own learning and ideas as well. Encourage equality of all students and how schools can be connected outside of school as well. So things that they're learning in school can be implemented in the community, as well as other disciplines and outside of the school as well. For me as a future teacher, basically it's just a very small dot point that I've put there, which is the philosophy one student at a time. Has created a community of learners, and through looking at other researchers, through my research, looking at other educators, this one really stuck out to me. Elliot Washor himself, but more of the community that he's built and he will leave behind, more of a legacy that he's created, as well as I think that this one student at a time is something that not all teachers focus on. They're more focused on the content being taught rather than the students that they're teaching at hand, and that they're all little humans that are all still learning, and they're learning how the world works and everything like that. So I think from my previous personal experiences in the classroom, seeing many kids that have been left behind, and they could really thrive off of this encouragement and individual attention, I think this really stuck out to me as I've seen it firsthand, and also would have probably appreciated it myself going through primary school. It really made them feel special and feel like they have a big support system around them, and rather than making them feel like they were less than because they were maybe falling behind or not as academically skilled as some of their peers, it really pushes them up, and it really builds upon their strengths that they do have that many other people may not have or may not tap into. This really encourages this individual growth and their own love for learning. And that's something that I would want to take with myself as a future teacher, to bring myself back to why I started teaching in the first place and why this is really important. Well, first, in 2022, they have a Big Bang event, which is what they called kind of like a conference where there's mentors, teachers, parents and students all coming together as a celebration of learning and education, rather than it being a sit down, more of a conference styled lecture. It's more of an interactive community where everyone can come together and talk about their experiences and how they can actually move forward. And through the years of COVID, this has been their first face-to-face interaction with students, mentors, their teachers and their parents as well. So it's really a big celebration. Through the past few years, their learning has catered to the world of COVID, to ensure that this global pandemic hasn't stopped their organisation in any way, but actually strengthened it. They've really taken this online learning as a push to build their core corporation online rather than face-to-face, how they were previously doing it from the 1990s when it was first created. This global pandemic has really shifted their focus to online, and it's actually allowed them to reach out to other settings around Australia that they wouldn't normally, such as regional and remote communities and remote settings that they wouldn't normally be able to get to or maybe reach out to. They've been able to do this through the use of technology, so they've really taken COVID in their stride and they've taken it as a positive light rather than negative, and it's really built their corporation up to what it is today. Has really been implemented all across Australia and is actually moving globally as well. Big picture learning, co-found creator Elliot Washor is something that I think is really significant and something that I've really enjoyed learning about, and it is something that I will take into my future teaching, as their philosophy, one student at a time, is something that I feel is extremely important.